Welcome back. Hello again. Now we're going to continue with the explanation of sentence fragments. So this is sentence fragments part 2. Remember, to recap, we were studying sentence fragments and we were seeing that a sentence is all different from a fragment. Sentences are complete in thought and meaning. They can stand by themselves. They have a capital letter and a period at the end, and they make sense by themselves. Sentence fragments are just chunks or pieces of a sentence that are easily confused with a sentence, but they are not sentences. They are just parts of a sentence, so they need to be connected to a main clause or they need to add either a subject or a predicate. There are other correction methods that we're going to continue studying in this presentation. Here you're going to see the rest of the fragments that we didn't study in the previous video. Which ones are they? We're going to see the afterthought fragment, lonely verb fragment, and finally the appositive phrase fragment. Are you ready to continue? Well, let's begin then. Afterthought fragments. Okay? An afterthought clarifies earlier information by providing specific details. When an afterthought does not contain a main clause, it is a fragment. Afterthought. What does that mean? Well, if you try to figure out the meaning of this, you will find some markers that will introduce this kind of fragments. And among them, we can list the words especially, except, excluding, for example, for instance, including, like, and such as. The way, as if, etc. What do you do with these words? Well, you are exemplifying. You are introducing a thought that comes after a main idea. So when you talk about an afterthought, you are talking about these ideas that you use in order to over-explain a point. Let's take a look at some examples. And let's see the way to fix this kind of fragments. For example, leaky pens, candy wrappers, dollar bills, and paper clips, including the dog with 3 legs and the cat with 1 eye. That's clear. Such as leaving the stove, and teasing mean dogs. You here have 3 examples of an afterthought phrase fragment. As you see, the word for example, including, and such as are introducing a list of ideas. How do you fix it? Well, let's take a look at the revised versions and then you can think of what correction method we use. I always stuff tons of items in my purse. For example, leaky pens, candy wrappers, dollar bills, and paper clips. Do you see what we did? Can you see the way in which we revised it? Well, you're going to maybe notice that we have attached a main clause, an independent clause. Then we use the linking word here, which is the transitional word to exemplify or to introduce this new thought. That's why afterthought. And you have said an independent clause, let's say a main idea, and then you have used the word, for example, and listed the items right here. Then in the second example, Savvy loves all freak animals in town. She's an animal lover. Comma, including the dog with the 3 legs and the cat with 1 eye. Before using the word excluding, Savvy loves all freak animals in town, we have an independent clause. Then we have a comma, and then we use the afterthought phrase. Yes, to exemplify this idea. Savvy loves all freak animals in town. What freak animals? All those that include the dog with the 3 legs and the cat with 1 eye. Savvy sure has a very peculiar taste in animals. The animals are cute in all the ways they are, even if they have 3 legs and even if they have 1 eye. They should be protected too. What about the last example, such as leaving the stove on and teasing mean dogs? Here is the idea that introduces this phrase. Brian fears nothing. He's a daredevil. such as leaving the stove on and teasing mean dogs. Such as leaving the stove on and teasing mean dogs is explaining that he fears what? Nothing. Do you understand the afterthought fragments? We're going to have more practice and you're going to see more examples of this one. Take a look at them and write them down. Now, the next type of fragment that we're going to study is lonely verb fragments. Lonely comes from the word lone, right? So this type of fragment is a loner. Why is it a loner? Because writers sometimes forget to write a subject in a sentence, especially non-native speakers. The result of this is a verb that is apart from its partner, apart from it, from the subject. With the subject missing, the group word thus becomes a lonely verb fragment. Generally, this type of fragment will be marked with the beginning of a coordinating conjunction, but it is open, but not always. And which ones are the coordinating conjunctions? Well, what we call fanboys. And, but, for, or, nor, so, and yet. Those are the coordinating conjunctions. After the coordinating conjunction, sometimes you will find a coordinating conjunction. Sometimes you won't find a coordinating conjunction. So you have the immediate expression of the action. So in other words, what marks a lonely verb fragment? A lonely verb, that's right, the name. It's pretty obvious. Just remember that a verb alone cannot be a sentence, unless under the exception of is imperative statements. Because imperatives do not have an implied, they have an implied subject. You don't write it, you don't say you run. You say run, just that. Eat, you don't say you eat, right? There is a difference between an imperative and a declarative statement. So you are using an imperative instead of an indicative because you want to give an order or a command, but that is all different, right? Let's see some examples. Examples and ways to fix lonely verb fragments. Which one is the way in which you can help the reader understand this type of fragment? Well, let's see some examples, but knew that all of his effort will prove useless in the long run. How will you fix this one? Took the thick book and with a heavy sigh, loaded it on top of her research file. How can we fix a lonely verb fragment? Remember, it is apart from the partner, it is apart from the subject. It's separated from it. So what should you do? Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. You will add a subject. That's the way to fix it. That's the easiest one to fix. How are you going to do that? You can say, for example, Stanley knew that all of his effort would prove useless in the long run. Yes? So here you're going to introduce a subject that you will erase, of course, the coordinating conjunction because you're not coordinating anything. To coordinate, you remember, that is the concept we have studied before. Coordinating conjunctions connect two independent clauses, making a compound sentence. So if you have one independent clause and another independent clause, there's a bridge between them, which is called CC, coordinating conjunction. But you don't have an independent clause before it. So what do? You just delete the coordinating conjunction and add a subject. We can also have another independent clause at the beginning, but that will make more of an effort. But you can also do that. It's another correction method. In the other example, you have took the thick book and with a heavy sigh, loaded it on the top of her research file. I feel very related. Here you have an incomplete idea because it doesn't have a subject to perform the action. So you can say, Anna took this thick book and with a heavy sigh, loaded it on top of her research file. You see, it's the easiest one to correct. Finally, we have the appositive fragments. Because an appositive can be long, sometimes writers confuse or mistake this one as a complete sentence. By itself, as all the other 5 types of fragment that we have studied so far, an appositive is never a sentence. Please do not make this mistake if you have already studied this one, because fragments obscure the message in your writing. You may have brilliant ideas, but if your papers are full of fragments, that will distract the reader. And instead of paying attention to what you're saying, the content, the reader will pay attention to your mistakes. So you've got to be very careful with this. Markers that introduce the appositive phrase fragments. An appositive fragment will begin with a noun and usually include one or more clarifying phrases or subordinate clauses after it. Sometimes appositives are long and they are accompanied by either a phrase or a clause. But remember, what does an appositive do? An appositive is a noun, right? It is a noun equivalent. So they will appear in this position, which they have to over-explain or provide extra information about a noun. Yes? So if they are providing extra information about a noun, what do you do to correct them? Let's take a look at examples. The unprepared student who was always begging for an extra pencil and a couple of sheets of blank paper, why? It's incomplete, right? It's just a noun phrase. How do we fix it? Alex, subject. The unprepared student who was always begging for an extra pencil and a couple of sheets of blank paper, comma, was the annoying classmate everyone hated. Sorry. You see here the subject and the predicate. So what did you do? You place the appositive explaining the subject, but obviously you had to attach an independent clause. See? Then you have Pepper, a cat around whom people need to guard their fingers and foot. What happens? It's incomplete. Pepper, there's a mistake here, sorry. The subject, pepper, comma, small letter for a cat around whom people need to guard their fingers and foot, comma, is badly spoiled in love. I say and because Pepper is my cat. It is lovely, but it is spoiled a lot. So you here see an example of how to connect this appositive to a main clause. Those are the type of fragments. Let's review the ones that we have gotten so far. Sentence fragments, at the beginning, they're not a little bit difficult to understand, but they are not at all. We just need practice. And attached to this video, at the end, I'm going to show you where to find the material for you to see how to practice identifying and fixing fragments. Think of all the answers we have gotten so far. The types of fragments that we have studied: subordinate clause fragments, participle phrase fragments, appositive fragments, infinitive phrase fragments, afterthought fragments, and I'm missing one, lonely verb fragments, the easiest one. There's a little bit more that we need to take into account, which is the punctuation rules. Which ones are these punctuation rules that we need to keep in mind? One, that the main clause and the subordinate clause must be connected. Like when the main clause is at the beginning, there's no comma in the middle, no punctuation. That's the absence of. Second one, subordinate clauses, comma, and then independent clause. You need to have a comma because here you have a subordinating conjunction, a subordinated clause, and then you have a main clause or an independent clause. What happens, this is to fix the subordinate clause fragments, for example. What happens then when you have a main clause and you have a participle phrase? Main clause, comma, participle phrase. You can do that. Or the opposite, participle phrase, comma, main clause, to fix the participle phrase fragments, both present and past. Main clause, no comma, infinitive phrase. Or if you place it at the beginning, you can have infinitive phrase, comma, main clause. Remember, infinitives are nouns, they are not verbs. So to fix an infinitive phrase fragment, you don't have to conjugate anything. That's not a verb, that's a noun phrase, okay? And this is the one I was telling you, infinitive phrase, comma, main clause. Generally, this will mean that you have the infinitive phrase as an adverb word. Then we have infinitive phrase, comma, afterthought transition, comma, no, you don't need a comma, and then you list the details. This applies for all the words except, that's why you see the star here, The only exception, for example, for instance, because we will say a main clause, comma, for example, comma, and then the details. Then you have how to fix the non-linear fragment. You add a main clause, no comma, and because you have a coordinating conjunction sometimes, no comma, but the non-linear phrase. Or you can only add a subject to it and you erase the coordinating conjunction. Remember, that's why the start. Then we have that no matter where you attach the apostrophe, at the beginning, in the middle, or at the end, it should always be set off by commas. You separate it from the rest of the sentence. You separate it from the main clause by adding commas because this is extra information. That was pretty much what we had to do in this second video. Thank you very much for watching. Did you take notes? Time to see how much you understood. And this is the best time of all, the homework. Homework for you will be a practice sheet that I'm going to share with you in a Google Classroom class, so you can check it out today. It's going to be accompanied by the e-learning group for this week, and it is for you to practice. There will be examples and ways of revising the 6 types of fragments that we have studied, and you're going to see 4 different types of exercises that are listed there. They contain different kinds of examples and exercises, and the last one is a paragraph where you're going to identify the sentence fragments. You will attach them, you will connect them to sentences to see how your paragraph runs and to see how smoothly you can understand the ideas by connecting each of them. Remember, fragments are a serious mistake and we should avoid it. We should avoid having a fragment in our writing to make it accurate and academically okay. That was all for today. Remember that you need to self-pace your work. I'm sorry about the typo there. Remember that we will meet on Mondays with Zoom again, have the practice done and questions for further discussion. Remember that the best classes are those in which you guys ask a lot of questions. I'm going to get myself ready for all the questions you have. That was all for today. Thank you very much for watching this second video. Bye-bye.